Today we're going to talk about a topic that might make some people lose it and others not so much. We're going to talk about whether van life is actually eco-friendly. When I talk about ecology in van life, I mean someone who lives year-round in a camper van. Exactly what we did for 2 years. So I feel pretty qualified to talk about this topic because it's haunted me many nights, and I've been able to analyze both the sedentary lifestyle of a couple and the year-round van life lifestyle, and I'm going to share my conclusion with you. For those who are interested, I have an article with all the sources in the description, and if you're already on the article watching this video, well, the sources are in the rest of the article. Because yes, it's true that in van life videos, or even when we were on Twitch and all, people called us polluters. They called us polluters because we had a diesel camper van that uses up liters and liters of fuel. And that's not good, it's bad. And yes, that's true. We have a camper van that uses a lot of fuel. But life isn't just about driving around in a camper van, living the van life. I mean, I don't personally drink oil. You'll see that in a lot of ways, when you weigh things up, you realize that maybe living in a van year-round is much less polluting than a sedentary lifestyle. And that's what I'm going to try to explain to you with the different arguments. So let's start with engine pollution. Engine pollution, meaning the vehicle's pollution. The pollution from the engine itself, from the camper van itself. Now, compared to an electric vehicle, it's comparable. Now, I know this is going to annoy more than a few people, but you'll see in the studies. Studies can change once again. I'm telling you, this is as of right now, at the moment I'm making this video. There are still studies trying to show whether an old vehicle that's still on the road is less polluting than an electric vehicle. Because what we often forget is that it's not just about driving. The construction and the dismantling of the vehicle also require carbon dioxide, a lot of carbon dioxide. So, an electric vehicle that comes from the factory, it will need between 26,000 and 85,000 kilometers before it becomes less polluting than a gas-powered version. After 150,000 kilometers, an electric vehicle will have a potential impact that's 29% to 65% lower than a conventional vehicle. And at 300,000 kilometers, the impacts of the electric vehicle are 55% to 80% lower than those of a conventional vehicle. So you see, if you switch to a new electric car every other day, you're not actually less polluting than someone who uses a camper like ours, which is from before the 2000s. Our camper has about 200,000 kilometers on it. It needs very little maintenance to keep running. These are engines that can easily go twice as far. So, in a way, yes, it pollutes while it's running, we agree on that, but I don't change cars all the time. I don't have an electric car, and I don't swap electric cars every other day. So yes, indeed, a diesel engine like this one does pollute. But I wanted to point out, compared to an electric car, it depends on how and how many kilometers you're going to drive with your electric car. Because its construction and deconstruction also cause pollution. Next, I'd like to talk about the number of kilometers, because it's easy to say that a camper van pollutes, but it also depends on how many kilometers you drive. So you should know that for us, our camper van, when we live van life year-round, it's our only means of transportation. So, do you know how many kilometers we drove in a year when we were living van life? The number of kilometers we drove in 1 year, the number of kilometers we drove in 1 year was 20,000 kilometers. So, If you compare that to someone who lives in a rural area and commutes to work in the city every day, you'll see that we didn't drive much more in a year than someone who does their daily commute to work. So yes, once again, from a motorization standpoint, the camper van is much more polluting than newer engines, or even electric engines. There's no question about that. But now, I'm going to get into the areas where CO2 savings are huge when you do van life year-round. You're not ready for what you're about to hear because the second biggest source of carbon dioxide emissions is still heating and air conditioning. To give you an example, when I lived on the French Riviera in a studio, a 40 square meter studio facing north, and keep in mind that's a place where the weather is still nice in winter, my average monthly electricity bills were around 100 euros, sometimes going up to 130 euros, even during COVID. The camper van, on the other hand, is 10 square meters. 10 square meters. Imagine two people in 10 square meters and how quickly you can heat up that space. Yes, it's true when it comes to insulation, it's a disaster. But that doesn't change the fact. It's very easy to heat. Put two people in a 10 square meter room and you'll see you won't need much heating. And I'm telling you this if you spend the winter, especially in places where it's chilly. But the whole point of a camper van is to be free to be able to hit the road. And if in winter you go somewhere warm like the south of Portugal, you're not going to use much energy. So all the energy you use staying put at home, whether it's summer or winter, air conditioning in the summer or heating in the winter, just look at how many kilowatts you use compared to a camper van, where in summer you can go to cooler areas. In winter, you can go to warm areas, which means you'll always be fluctuating. You'll be oscillating between about 20 and 30 degrees. So between 20 and 30 degrees, you don't need to use air conditioning, you don't need to use heating, which leads to huge energy savings. And energy, well, it has to come from somewhere. So here in France, again, comes from nuclear power, so it's clean. But this is just to explain that in the end, just in terms of CO2, it's a massive saving. Massive over the year, so I ask you, is it still not ecological when you look at it from this first perspective? Another point of view that we usually forget when we're sedentary versus living in a van year-round is water, my friends, water. Water is still a precious resource. Water, well, in 20 years there won't be any left, as our dear Jean-Claude Van Damme used to say. And it's probably one of the things that shocked me the most when I did my research. In a camper van, you're limited by your water consumption. Our water tank holds 120 liters for the toilet, dishes, and shower, including 15 liters in the water heater for hot water. With that supply, we could last an average of 3 days. So we used 135 liters of water in 3 days for the two of us. 135 liters of water for two people. The daily water consumption of a single French person is 145 liters by themselves. So together, we used an average of 135 liters of water in 3 days, whereas someone living in a house would use 145 liters in just 1 day. So the two of us consume as much in 4 days as the average French person does in 1 day on average. Basically, the average French person uses in 1 year what we used in 6 years of van life. 6 years of van life water consumption for one person is equivalent to 1 year for someone living in a house. So, do you still think that living in a van year-round isn't eco-friendly? So we've covered heating and water. Now let's talk about electricity. And yes, because electricity You need a plan, you have to pay for electricity, which once again in France we're lucky it's nuclear. But for us in the camper van, we have solar panels. Knowing that we were 99% self-sufficient with the camper van, thanks to our panels, even though, yes, the battery isn't necessarily eco-friendly and the panels aren't necessarily eco-friendly either, our consumption, you'll even see in the article I have proof the consumption averaged 830 watts. Now, living in one place, I can tell you it's a whole different story. Because the French average, just for comparison, I told you 830 watts. Well, the French average is 8,700 watts per day. So basically, it would take 10 years. 10 years of living like us to use as much as 1 year of an average person living in one place. So, there you go. Isn't our lifestyle actually eco-friendly too? Is the problem, well, is our engine really still that much of a problem? Similarly, when it comes to traveling by camper van, let me continue animal products. You should know that while we were living the van life, and since our fridge isn't exactly the best, we tend to avoid buying animal products. Animal products are also among those that generate the most carbon dioxide. Simply buying things, clothes and that sort of stuff. Since we have limited space, we use way fewer belongings. So we consume fewer products that require energy and produce carbon dioxide. There you go. Through this video, I wanted to explain to you that people who live in a van year-round aren't polluters. They're not causing pollution. On the contrary, they actually save CO2 in ways you can't even imagine. Right now, we're back to alternating with a more sedentary lifestyle, and I can tell you, unfortunately, your brain falls back into its old bad habits. We consume more, we've gone back to using way more water than we did when we were living the van life. We've gone back to using more electricity because you get used to it. Comfort makes you get used to consuming, and then consuming even more. So, if you want the answer to the question, is living in a van year-round eco-friendly? Obviously, yes, in my opinion, it's super eco-friendly. So, based on what I just told you, feel free to share your opinion in the comments. Don't hesitate to let me know if you have any research that contradicts or supports what I just said. Sending you all big hugs. I'm looking forward to discussing this with you, and I'll see you soon in a new video.